Your mind is limitless. The possibilities are endless. Awaken Your Mind Magic shows you how you can dream limitlessly and live your life on a new level. Susan Kathleen speaks with ordinary people who are living extraordinary lives using the power of their mind. Abundance, prosperity, and success. There are no limits to what you can dream. Join Susan Kathleen on a journey into your dreams, making a difference and living life on your own terms. This is Awaken Your Mind Magic.
Hello and welcome, everyone. My guest speaker today is Lou DiMaggio, who comes from Los Angeles, California, USA. Lou is an actor, stand-up comedian, and writer. He began his career as a stand-up comic in New York. He's performed in nightclubs, television, film, and commercials, and is best known for his work on HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm. And some shows he's played in are Curb Your Enthusiasm, NCIS, and many more. And of course, his incredible documentary, Where Have You Gone, Lou DiMaggio? Lou and I first met in 2009 when I was working on board a ship as an art auctioneer, and he was a special guest of the cruise line I worked on at the time. We were cruising the Nordic countries and the Baltic Seas. In fact, we went to watch the Russian ballet together in St. Petersburg, Russia, and that was a great fun. Maybe we'll speak about that later. Lou, it's great to have you here with me on Awaken Your Mind Magic today. I'm truly honored that you have given me the time to chat with you today, as you are such a busy man.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Susan, and it's wonderful to speak with you again. It's been a long time. I look forward to our conversation. Let's catch it up.
And I look forward to digging out whatever I can from you. So I am really stoked today. I know it's my yesterday where you're sitting at. It's Sunday in LA. And of course, it's Monday here in Brisbane, Australia. And I always say to my guests, yep, I'm in the time machine. I can let you know all about your tomorrow. So you see, I'm part of the Awaken Your Mind Magic time machine crew.
Well, we should have done this tomorrow, so you could have told me about our election on Tuesday.
Oh, well, then I would have to, I could do that. Well, we'll wait and see, and you can tell me anyway. I'll keep my ears and eyes open, Lou. Lou, I class you in the league of some great actors. Robbie Williams, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and, of course, Lou DiMaggio. You have been one of my heroes from very, very young. And I'm blown away at having you here today. Tell us your story, how you awakened your mind magic.
Well, it all began for me. Everything started for me in stand-up comedy. I didn't necessarily, to be honest, my first show business influence was like so many other kids. I was very young. I was 5, but when I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I said, I don't know how to do that, but I want that. I want to do that, and I did sort of spend the rest of my time growing up trying to learn how to play the guitar, and I played like at little garage bands and all of that, which led me to later, I guess when I was around 15 or 16, then I started to think, I want to take this guitar seriously. And I wanted to learn how to play jazz guitar. I wanted to learn how to play classical guitar. And I felt like I wanted to go to school for music. So I did. I went to this school, which was not a very important, accredited school in the terms of the like Juilliard or something like that. But for contemporary music, it was really good. It was called Five Towns College. It was sort of like a Berkeley school, like in Boston, which is a contemporary music school. but not as famous or good. But it had really great instructors, and it really was worth going to. And also turns out really worth going to for me, because that's where I made the switch from music to comedy and acting, because I had a teacher there, as it always is, these mentors show up in your life. I was going along and I was playing and practicing, and I was deep down in my soul, I think I was like thinking, do you really want to sit in a room 6 hours a day practicing the guitar? You know, I didn't really know, but I kept pressing on anyway. So I was living in a little bit of denial there. And then I started taking these electives. I took an acting class and a communications class, and I met this teacher. And one of the projects that we had to do was to learn a monologue. And she picked the monologues. And for me, she picked a monologue from the Broadway show Lenny, about Lenny Bruce. So basically, it was a stand-up comedy monologue. So, you know, I'm a young acting student, and I want to give it all my method approach or whatever, and use all the skills that I'm learning and have learned. So I really studied Lenny Bruce, and I got his records, and I looked at any kind of, in those days you couldn't go on YouTube. I mean, you had to really scour, you know, to see video and stuff. But I really gave it something, and I remember, like, all the people were rehearsing their monologues, and I had enough sense to say, I'm not rehearsing it in front of anyone, because once you see it, all the jokes will be burned, so it won't have any effect at all. So sure enough, when I did it, I came out and did it, and it worked really well, and I got laughs. And it was at that point that the teacher said to me, I want to take you to New York City. I want to take you to the Improv. I want you to see a show. I said, yeah, that'd be cool. You know, I love comedy, I guess. Yeah. You know, I mean, I did. I never thought about doing it, but I really loved it, like most people. So this is such an incredible moment. I'll never forget. We went to the show. We're sitting in the audience. We're watching the show. We're laughing. We're having fun. There was a couple other people there. And at one point, she leaned into me and got my attention and said, you could do that, right? And I said, and I totally got it. I go, yes, yeah, I could do that. But she put that plan, like, laid it right on me. And it wasn't like a challenge. It wasn't a confrontation. It was just a fact. She was saying, you could do that. And I recognized that. And 2 years later, I was on that stage, and she was in the audience watching me. And it was an incredible moment, and it got everything started, really. So that's what I always turn to when I get asked a question like that.
Lou, you started off at Catch a Rising Star in the 80s. Is this did this progress from what you were doing and making your decision?
Yeah, I started. The Catch a Rising Star was like the sort of the pinnacle of those clubs, the showcase clubs. So you couldn't start there, because you had to be pretty good to even be there. So I started in the peripheral clubs around the tri-state area. In Long Island, Connecticut, New Jersey had tons of one-nighters and roadhouses. And you get really good fast, because you're working in front of horrible audiences and rowdy people. And so I did all of that stuff first. And then I started to weave my way into the New York City clubs. And I worked at the Improv as well. That was my other club, certainly. And but then at a certain point, I had a chance to get into Catch. And that's when everything really started to roll, because that was the club to be at. That's where all the industry people went. And it was very exciting, because, like, the comedy boom was I was literally riding the crest of that. I had no idea. When all of this was going down, I was setting myself up for a roller coaster ride that was going to go on for about 8 years, as far as, the peak interest of stand-up comedy, live stand-up comedy. And I was right in the middle of that. And it was very exciting. People like politicians used to come, and actors, and all kinds of famous people, rock stars, and to come and see us. We're unknown comedians, but there was this, everything was just turned toward us, all eyes, all lights on us. And it was the most fun time I ever had in my whole life. And also I was lucky enough to be, earning enough money to make a living. I wasn't getting rich, but it was I could live. I didn't have to take side jobs or anything like that to support myself. It also led to peripheral things. I started doing commercials and started to get my feet wet in acting. And like I said, it was the beginning of everything.
Who were some of the people that you got mind blown away that came and watched you in those days?
Oh, like people in the audience?
Yeah.
Oh, God. There was like David Bowie was in the audience, I think, one time. People like that, that were in New York. Probably a lot of politicians and stuff that you wouldn't know who they were, but they were sort of players. Here's the thing that you have to understand. Like the guys that worked the door at Catch a Rising Star made more money than the acts because they used to take bribes. So it was like one of those scenes, it was like Studio 54, where everybody wanted to get in. It was the happening thing of the moment. So they would just think nothing of giving these guys $100. The room only held 175 people. So it was constantly throngs outside waiting to get in. It was unbelievable. I mean, that eventually went away, but at least I was there when it was at its peak. I got to experience it. It was phenomenal. For a performer to always go out in front of a hot crowd, you can't have it any better than that. It's just the best because they're ready to laugh. They're ready to receive you. They want to like you. And they're all having a great time. They're drinking, whatever. And like I said, I was just so fortunate to have had that as my springboard into the business that I ended up being in.
Who are your fellow comedians?
Well, I had some people, God, I mean, right off the top of my head, my friends that I worked out with in those days, Joy Behar, Colin, Quinn, Suzie, Essman, Larry David was there. These are the ones that I knew, really well. And then there were others that I knew more peripherally, like Jerry Seinfeld, of course, used to come in all the time when he was around. He had already sort of started becoming like the number one comic in the country. So he was traveling a lot. But whenever he was around, he would come in. Rodney Dangerfield used to come in. It was like living in a dream, But the people that I worked with, you form bonds because as fun as it is, and as I'm remembering these good moments, it's also completely like turns your life upside down because you have to be there all the time. And you're young, so you don't care, like you don't feel like you're missing anything, but you end up spending a lot of time with people under these interesting circumstances. It's like almost like being an army buddy or something like that, because you also survive the times when it's not so fun and when it's nothing's happening or you're not getting stage time or whatever, so you grow up with a group of people and you bond with them because of those experiences, I think.
I totally hear you on that. And when we talk about this as well, I'm going to actually take you to your childhood, because when I was researching you, I thought I knew you pretty well, having really always followed you as a comedian and actor most of my life. But when I was researching you for this podcast, I was amazed to find you were born in Germany.
Yes, I was. I was born in Heidelberg, Germany. I was an army brat. Yeah. My father was stationed in Heidelberg, Germany. He was a major. Actually, they had a pretty nice life. I had a governess and all that stuff, because he was an officer, and this was post-war Germany, so America was in complete control over there. And it was nice, I guess. I don't remember it because I was only there till I was 2, till we moved back to New York. But my brother and sister went to some other posts. They were much older than me, so they got to experience the Army life, the Army brat life more, and went to different schools and all that stuff. But for me, I was born there, came back, and they settled in New York, and that's where I grew up. He stayed in the Army for another 10 years or so, but he was stationed in New Jersey, and he used to commute and come home on weekends. And it was really weird, actually, because my dad was in the Army. He was an officer. He ended up retiring a lieutenant colonel. But when I was growing up, he was commuting. So I would only see him on weekends. And then when I was around 7, he went to Vietnam for a year. So I didn't see him for a year. And then all of a sudden at age 10, he retires and now he's home all the time. And we didn't really know each other that well. All of a sudden we're just like dumped together. Like, we've had this sort of peripheral thing going on and now we're around all the time. So that was interesting.
We were talking before we actually started recording this podcast about the wars he went through. Can you speak about that? Yeah,
he was, a typical Greatest Generation fashion. He didn't talk about any of it. Like he was a real sort of very stoic, but yet I knew that he was with the 101st Airborne in World War II. Okay, and if you remember, there was an HBO series called Band of Brothers. He was in that outfit. He was in Normandy to D-Day. Those were the battles that he was in. All of those battles. I mean, if you were going to brag, you got something to brag about. So he was very proud of that, and yet he again was very stoic and didn't talk about it. Also, he grew up in a very poor family, an immigrant family. My both sets of my grandparents are Italian immigrants that came to New York in the early 20th century and really scraped to get by and raised their kids. And those kids didn't have much either. So the Army was a way for my father to get 3 square meals a day. And it turned out, though, that they assessed him, and he was a very smart guy, and they realized that there was places to go for him. So he was in intelligence and went up pretty high up in that food chain. But started out as in World War II in the 101st Airborne, which is really something. If you don't know anything about those guys, you should look into it.
I have a passion for the wars and everything. In fact, my grandfather was issued with license number 25. First World War, in the entire Commonwealth and the British Isles. So he was flying one of those funny old things like the Wright brothers created a few years after they learned how to fly. So I have an absolute passion for that. And you telling me that makes me wonder if he ever suffered post-traumatic stress and if that affected you as a child.
Wow. I would say, yeah, but none of that stuff was ever dealt with in those days. And, I don't necessarily like to tell tales, but, he certainly had an issue with alcohol. And I think that's how that was dealt with. I mean, honestly, in those days. And that was something that they picked up while they were there. And then when they came home, it was much like in the 60s with the Vietnam War with drugs. It was used as a coping mechanism to get through these incredible times. And then it was difficult to shake when they came back. And again, they didn't have, it wasn't, I hate to say it, but it wasn't manly to say that you had, first of all, the term post-traumatic stress disorder didn't exist. Right? How many times has that changed over the years? It started with shell shock. And again, that was associated. If you had shell shock, that meant you were a coward, which is the furthest thing from the truth. But at least we are on the road to dealing with stuff like that today in a much better way. And it's still a huge problem, and it's still horrible because of what's happening to veterans today, committing suicide and all that. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was a lot of things that were happening that I was dealing with and he was dealing with and our whole family was dealing with that were never sorted out. And the magnitude of what they were was never even acknowledged, which is insane to think of today. But that's the way it was. It's just the way it was. So, yeah, I'm sure a lot of that formed me in good ways and bad ways, and all that dysfunction junction. But that's what you get. That's the hand you get dealt, and you move on. So,
yeah, totally. Do you think that COVID-19 at the moment is also creating people highly stressed and depressed?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I can see, I mean, obviously we're all living through this, which I think is I don't want to say that there's anything positive about this, because there isn't. There's too many people that have died, and it's horrible. But there are things about this time that have happened that have been interesting and positive. The ability to sort of Groundhog Day your life and go back and do something that you wanted to work on, or get your things in order, get your affairs in order, explore your creativity, those things. But again, the time, it keeps going on, right? So in the beginning, people keep trying to make adjustments. In the beginning, they're like, okay, I'll take some time off and I'll do this and I'll do that. And then like tick tock, oh, it's still going. Okay. All right. Well, now I'll do this. But yeah, eventually you catch up with yourself, and you start to get frustrated and in many cases angry, certainly cranky. You just want things to change, and I think we still have a ways to go here, based on what I'm seeing. Maybe not in Australia, lucky you, but our country not handling it so well. Go figure.
Actually, Lou, I'm very fortunate. I'm in Queensland state, and they're almost COVID free, and people don't wear. Yeah. However, there are other places in Australia that are really not very good at all. I tend to agree with you about what we are going through in this, where we do have time to regroup. We have more time to actually say to ourselves and assess what is really worthwhile doing and why am I here? So I agree with you there that it is very interesting for all of us these times, and that if we take it and turn it into a positivity, it can become that. And I'm not saying or disregarding the people who have died or have been very ill in this time. My daughter in London had COVID, and my mum in South Africa has recently died. And during COVID, nobody could be with her. She died on her own.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. I mean, we had a virtual funeral or memorial, whatever you want to say, for my mum. We were all over the world, and it was bizarre. Yeah. So I really do empathize with people who've gone through this on a negative side. However, I must say to you and to anybody who's listening that this is a time to really change and understand that whatever you're doing, creativity or whatever it is that you really love doing, like you love being a comedian or you were a brilliant musician, we should be doing that. We should be taking it and really embracing it.
Well, yes. And also because I think that we are living in such a fever pitch communication era where things are thrown out of. It's like having a fire hose in your face, right, of information and constant barrage of news media. I don't know what it's like there, but here you can imagine. Because of the way things are politically, we have a huge divide. It's almost 50-50. It's just very intense. So, this is again a chance when this is happening, the COVID thing, for people to say, I don't have to watch all of this stuff constantly. I can't work. I can't do this. I can't do that. To turn it into a positive, then just take some chunks out of the day at least and get away, meditate, play the guitar. I got back to, I always played the guitar, right? That was my first thing, but I've never gotten rid of guitars. I've always had one, but during this, I've been diving in and just like, I think I'll learn the guitar solo from Stairway to Heaven. You can go on YouTube because that's something I wanted to do when I was 15, and now I can do it. I don't know. It's just weird because on the one side, it seems like a frivolous response to this major tragedy that really we don't even know how it ends yet. But all I can say, how to really define what I'm saying, is that you got to try to live as positive as you can in the moment, even while all of this stuff is going on around you. Be aware, be sensitive, be helpful, but feed your soul. You have to. You can't let this, if you're not physically sick, you can't get sick from just being involved, around it. You have to shore up your soul's immunity too, because we need strong people in this world.
You are so right. And what I'm going to say to you now is very experienced in learning to regroup, because after moving to LA in 89, when you went through looking to acting, etc., people talk about this mysterious act of career and self-sabotage, and you stopped doing stand-up comedy forever. Talk to us about that.
It's interesting. My first excuses were to say, and it's true, all these things add up. I mean, it was a combination of the doldrums, like the comedy booms really went away. So it went from one extreme to another. So it became more difficult. The club scene and that life became more difficult. The audiences were less. People were less enthusiastic. The saturation had been complete. There's too many comedians on television. So, like everything else, it goes from one extreme to another. So that's one thing. My personal life at the time was not going great, so that contributed to it. And the thing is, and it's hard to admit, but you can discover. I think I could even say, like, recently, and here we are today talking about PTSD. I think that I had PTSD about being a performer. I had been on a 15-year, at least, maybe more, around that amount of time, where my whole waking life was just about this and the stress of it. And again, at the time when you're young and you start out, you have so much enthusiasm and you're running on so much energy and you're having fun and you take for granted how hard it really is to do it. You don't think of it. But when you get away from it, you realize, you stop for a second and you go, wow, I did that? I did. I mean, it's hard. It takes a lot out of you. And there's a lot of things that change. You change philosophically. I got to a point where I would say to myself, I don't have this fire inside of me to make people laugh anymore. It's like I did it. I know I can do it. And I feel like I started to lose a little respect for it, for myself. Like, do you really need to go? Do you need it? That some people do. They never get tired of doing it. I got tired of doing it. And yet I still needed, the affirmation. And I got that from talking to my comedian friends on the phone. If I could make Colin Quinn laugh on the phone, that's like making 4,000 people laugh at a stranger. You know what I mean? Like it's a much more satisfying thing. So, and yet it's a double-edged sword, because you feel like kind of like, a failure. You feel like you gave up. But really, sometimes you need to close one door yourself so other things can happen and you can move on. It's very complicated. So there's not a simple answer to that question, is I guess what I would say. Yeah,
well, I mean, I look at people, you talk about PTSD, and I look at Robbie Williams, who is was another person I adored. And everybody thought he was just the funny guy. And underneath that song, The Tears of a Clown When Nobody's Around, is true. And you are on this high, and then behind scenes, there's the other stuff going on as well. Right. So thank you for sharing that. This brings me to ask you about your documentary. Where have you gone? Lou DiMaggio. Talk to me about it.
Well, I will first of all will say that it certainly wasn't planned, as usually those things aren't. I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's a television producer who we had done a few things together years back. And we were friendly. We were friends. We hadn't seen each other in a while. We were just getting together to catch up and have some lunch. And honestly, too, you do that. That's you always hear, like, we're having lunch. People are having lunch. Well, people do that in Los Angeles, and because that's how they get jobs. It's networking. I don't know and that's another thing, right? That's not happening now. People aren't having lunch. So we were talking, and, part of me's gauging and seeing what he's up to, because I was maybe looking for a job at the time. And he told me that he was possibly doing a TV show that was going to be hosted by Richard Belzer. So I just started waxing about Richard Belzer, because he was a comedian that I knew from back in the day, but way before my time, that I loved. And I thought he was an unsung hero of comedy. And he was the New York comedian. He was Catch a Rising Star. He was like the first MC at Catch a Rising Star that really defined what it meant to be hosting a show. Like in New York, it's like, if you're the MC, you're the guy, you're running the show. And in that scene was one of the few scenes where they took that guy seriously, because it's really important to set up other people and absorb when the crowd is not doing so good, get them back up. You're the maestro. Anyway, he was the guy. He was the original. So the stuff that I'm telling you now about him, I started to tell my friend, and he started to ask me questions. We took this deep dive down the rabbit hole of comedy and New York comedy, all the stuff that I ended up doing, right? Ending up at Catch a Rising Star, being one of those house MCs like Belzer and Bill Maher and some of the people that I followed. And I would say we were going on for more than an hour, maybe more. At one point, he said to me, "I would love to make a doc about this. I'm really itching to make a doc." He said, but he said, the one thing it needs is we need to add a personal story to it, which would be, maybe if you're interested, would you try to make a comeback and get back on stage and go through whatever it takes to do that, concurrent with this story about the old days and what it was like, and archival footage and interviews and all that. So, as they always say, you say yes in the room and then you figure it out, right? You say, yeah. But the crazy thing about that, it was another one of those weird spiritual moments. I had been thinking about doing it again for probably a good year at least leading up to this meeting. And I had actually even thought at one point, the only way that really could happen is if somebody was making a documentary, because then I would have to do it. And it might even be a little bit easier, because I would get some access that I wouldn't normally get if I just came back off the street, So here it is, put laid in my lap. And that's how it started. And we shot it over the course of about a year and a half, I think. And we started with the interviews, which was the most fun I may have ever had, reconnecting with some of those people and sitting down with them and getting to interview them. Honestly, I thought, man, if I could just do that for the rest of my life, I would love to do that, because it was, just comedians talking to comedians. It's a language. It doesn't matter how long you've been apart. It's just always there because you've had these common experiences. So that's the genesis of how it happened.
I wanted to try doing comedy. New York at the time is like the Dylan song, where you've got nothing to lose, and I had nothing. So I told all my friends I was going to do stand-up comedy. He told me, well, you got to audition at Catch a Rising Star. I said, okay, well, where's that?
It was the 1980s in New York City. Stand-up comedy was hot. And one club was at the center of it all.
Catch a Rising Star in the 80s, that was the place.
Catch was the one you wanted to play.
Rolling Stone called it the Studio 54 of comedy clubs.
Paul McCartney, David Bowie, there's Chevy Chase in that little room, that tight little room.
They found Billy Crystal at Catch. They found Richard Belzer at Catch, Andy Kaufman.
So if you wanted a career, you needed to get on at Catch.
It was the golden age of stand-up.
Thank you very much.
And I was there.
I know I'd go from rags to riches.
Welcome to the stage, Mr. Lou DiMaggio, ladies and gentlemen.
Lou was one of the best comics. He was great.
How's everybody doing tonight, all right?
He was very easygoing on stage. He looked like John Cusack in those days.
The last girl I went out with was the most uptight person I ever met in my life, but she had a good excuse. She went to Catholic school and Vietnam, okay? So...
In 1989, I was on top of the world. But then, I threw it all away.
that was sad to me when Lou stopped doing stand-up. It was sad.
This is my story. It's about getting a second chance to do the one thing I was ever great at.
All I know is that this is unfinished business of what I started to do. I really, honestly, don't think a day has gone by that I haven't thought about it. I never stopped being that guy. I need to find out if I can still do that again.
Halfway through, you're going to be like, holy Christ, no one's laughing.
How do we finance this? I feel like you can only talk about something so long until you have to do it. I'd like to pursue a dancing career.
Yeah, I know. But
I'm a really good dancer.
Whoa. This is a real thing that I did, and it's an art form. And you can't dabble. You either do it or you don't do it. What do you think? What kind of advice could you give me?
Everything is geared towards going on that night.
I want to really do it right this time.
My advice to Lou is to train like Rocky.
I got to go through this stuff and see if it's really gold or is it just garbage.
Where are the jokes?
Oh, this is a funny line. How come the moon doesn't have a name? The last time I was a stand-up, there were no cell phones even. That guy is a different guy than who I am now. I'm going back and forth from being just scared to being terrified.
No one knows who the hell you are, and they all told me to get across to you that they don't care.
Where have you gone, Lou DiMaggio? Joking Lou has left and gone away. Wait, hold on. Okay, let's go.
That was brilliant. Thanks so much, Lou. And thanks so much for letting us share it. Whereabout can the listeners find the full documentary?
The documentary is available on Amazon Prime or Amazon, Amazon Video. If you have a Prime membership, you can watch it for free. Otherwise, you can rent or buy it. I'm not sure what it's going for. Probably $3.99 or something, and I don't know, but it's cheap. All movies are cheap now. And I think it's also on Apple Movies too, or iTunes, whatever you call that. So that's where it's available.
Thanks. We'll put the links in for everybody to find it when we upload the podcast, because it's brilliant. I've watched it, and you're my hero, Lou.
Well, I'm so glad that, it's one of those things where it didn't really do that great. It was a lot of, it's typical show business stories of bad distributors and all of those things. I mean, it did well critically and it did well in film festivals, but we got a bad business situation. So it lives. I mean, it's there. People can see it. And who knows? Maybe it'll become something. It'll have a life of its own in some other way. I don't know, but I'm proud of it. I think it's good.
Well, I think it's good too, and I think all the people that contributed towards it and were in it with you, they're just funny.
Yeah,
they're brilliant.
It's great to hang out with them.
Yeah, Lou, you're an Emmy-winning writer for television. Tell us more.
Well, that sort of picks up where the stand-up leaves off in a way, because one of the transitions that was happening was that I wanted to go into another area. The thing of it is, I also realized, looking back on my career, was that I would get an itch every 10 years to either add a new quiver, a new arrow in my quiver, or something like that. So it started with all stand-up. Then there was more acting involved and adding that. And then around that time, towards the end of the stand-up, I wanted to start working in production as a writer, producer. And I got a couple of opportunities that were right in my wheelhouse, as we say, right? I was really right for, that had to do with comedy and stuff. And there was two comedy game shows, and like the second job I worked on, I won an Emmy, which was insane. Incredible luck. And so it kind of launched another area of my career that is still around to this day. I mean, I still do these jobs here and there. But that was when it all started. This would have been late 90s, early 2000s. And then, you know, there was this time too when I think about, we talk about all these quivers, right? All these different things that I was doing, or skills. And I remember like years in the early 2000s when I would do my favorite, and this is my favorite thing, was that, then the reason why I wanted to branch out was because I had a year where I acted in a sitcom, I acted in a movie, I wrote on a show, I did stand up, I did everything that I know how to do. And I was so happy to do that. Now, in reality, the way time works out and the way demand works out, you know, the real reason why you branch out is so that you can be working on something else when that other thing isn't as happening as much. And that's pretty much how it's generally worked out. So I just always felt that was part of one of my instincts, was like, you got to be able to shift, stick and move, as they say in boxing. Get in there, move around. You know, you can't, so it's not happening over here, go over there. And that's, you know, kept me rolling. And also creatively, I like it. I like doing different things. You get bored doing the same thing all the time. I do.
So many creatives, and so many creatives do. They sort of work on about 4 different things, even more. And then it's almost like the shiny ball syndrome. They have this idea and they think, whoa, yeah, I'm just going to go to the next thing because that's cool. And I totally can empathize because I do the same thing. Lou, you're very humble. What did you win the Emmy for? You didn't say. You just said a job.
Oh, actually, it was for a Comedy Central show called Win Ben Stein's Money, which was a really funny game show hosted by Ben Stein, who people are probably aware of him. He's the Bueller guy in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but he was also a political speechwriter for Nixon. A very interesting, actually kind of controversial guy. Very smart. And his co-host was Jimmy Kimmel, who also went on to become Jimmy Kimmel. So it was a really funny show. It was very ahead of its time. And we wrote all of these really creative titles. And we were able to weave comedy into it. Was like, I guess the idea would be like if you were watching a show like Jeopardy and you were able to laugh, and the material was kind of sophisticated and a weird combination between profane and intellectual. It really kind of had a very unusual twist to it. So I was proud to have been involved in that. And it was a mind blower to win an award. But I have to say, you know, what does it really mean? It doesn't, it's so random to me in a way, winning an award. Like, I mean, sometimes it'll change your life, I guess. I mean, if you're an actor and you win an Oscar, it's going to help your career. I mean, most of the time, 99% of the time. There are cases when it didn't, but it usually does. But this was just like a nice little award. It was a big award, but, you know, it didn't. It just was what it was, and moved on to the next thing.
I love you. You're so humble. You're great. Curb Your Enthusiasm investor. Talk to me about that.
Wow. Well, that was like the show had been on for a couple of years, and anybody that was in comedy and stand up and improv and all kinds of comedy actor people all wanted to get a chance to do it because it has such a unique way of being shot, of being produced. The idea that it's improvised, which it is, it really is. It has a very strong framework of what's going to happen, but what's going to be said, no one really knows. That's all directed by Larry. So I got an opportunity to audition for it, and I went in and I read with Larry, and it went really well. I remember, but I didn't get the job, and I was, not that I was crushed, but I was like, I don't get it. Why didn't I get the job? And it turns out that I was not really right for the part, like the comedy part and all the chops and all that I had, but I wasn't really physically right for the part. And all right, fine. But then a couple of weeks later, I got a call and they offered me a recurring role, which is 100 times better, right? I did like 4 or 5 episodes or something like that, playing an investor in a restaurant that Larry was going to open. So this was like the whole, like in that show, there's always like a secondary story to whatever's going on, or there's this meat story in the middle, and there's all this crazy stuff that happens around it. So this anchor of the restaurant was always there in that season, and it was comedy nirvana to be doing it. I felt like I was walking on a cloud the whole time I was doing it, because at first, getting used to improvising in a television show, at first, it's like jumping into cold water. But once you get used to it, you really like it and you want to keep doing it. And that's exactly what happened. So I did that. And it was really like a Cinderella experience, because when it was over, the carriage turned back into a pumpkin. But I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do it. I did get a chance to go back some seasons later to do a little bit more, but it's like a drug. I just wish I could do that all the time. It's fantastic, and of course the show speaks for itself. It's so different. It's so innovative. It's so funny. It's so heads and tails funnier than anything else on television. And I was just really proud to have been involved with it.
Well, you got best appearance for that. No, you did.
What's
best
that?
Appearance? Best appearance being the recurring role.
Oh yeah. Did. Well, yeah. It's great to do it once, but to do it like 4,
You're funny.
5, 6, 7.
You, Mr. Lou, are very funny. What's that? And what's an Emmy Award? You are just great. So now you're also known for Two Broke Girls, Detective James. Tell us about that.
Well, that was basically just a guest spot, on a TV show where I got a chance to play a decent amount of cops over the years, which I always thought was really something. I thought that I could just make a complete living doing that, So it was fun. I love doing that. I love it's like playing. That's really like playing Cops and Robbers, right? Or Army, or all the games that boys like to play. It's fun, and especially a New York detective, taking out the badge, and love it. So I did that. I played a gangster on NCIS, but so I guess my typecasting choices are usually cops and gangsters, I guess, of which I'm really not either one.
So you were Nestor Carbone.
Yeah, that was another.
Yeah.
Play a Philadelphia gangster who's like a chop shop guy who sells stolen cars and reads the racing form and all that. It was a lot of fun, again, to play those big characters.
Speak like him. Be him.
Be
Nestor.
What are you looking for? I don't know. That's not me. I didn't do it. What are you talking about? MI6, MI7? I don't know.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that, Lou. That was great.
You really put me on I actually pulled I think I actually pulled a line out of the script.
I think you did. Well done. It never goes away. You were born and are in an era of being a baby boomer.
Yeah, technically I am. I grew up in I was born in 58, right? So that is way within the parameter, because it's 45 to 65, I think. 64, something like that. 1964 is the cutoff date. But, it's different. I could tell you from a front row seat, because my brother and sister were 10 and 11 years older than me, right? So those were the real frontline baby boomers. I was watching what was going on in the world as a child in the 60s through them. My brother went to Vietnam too, My sister was going through the Mary Tyler Moore life of trying to grow up during the time of feminism and breaking out of the traditions that up until then were just that women would get married and buy pots and pans, and that was it. That was all you're going to do. So I got to see all that experienced the 60s, like I said, from the front row, but I was a kid, I didn't really, I was a baby boomer, but I was a baby in the baby. I was a baby boomer. And then in the 70s, when I was coming of age, it was just a different, weird time. It was like all of the, like people were like taking drugs and all that, but it was like just to get high and be stupid. Like there wasn't anything on the line. Most decades end a couple of years into the next decade, right? So the 70s was really more defined by Watergate and things like that. And then of course it turning and becoming more me centric. That's all true. That's when I was growing up. But, having been a kid in the 60s and having seen all that stuff so close up, I mean, it stuck with me even to this day. Like there are people now who, like they like to rewrite history and say, oh, those people demonstrating against the war. Well, yeah, those people demonstrating a war, that war stopped that war. I'm sorry to correct you. But if that didn't happen, it would have went on and on and on. It made a difference. I know. I was there. I saw it. So it's weird. Like I certainly identify with the generation very much culturally because I love all things, that came out of like the Kennedys and the Beatles and all of those things that are so defined by that time, all the best of the best of the best. But I sort of see myself as a tail end and more part of the next generation in a way in terms of demeanor. But one thing that both the baby boomers and the Gen Xers shared, I think, was this being on your own and learning how to grow up. And I mean, it's absurd how we grew up. Like we were basically just free range. They call them free range kids now. There's no such thing really, where they used to open the door in the morning, you'd go out and then you come home, eat, go out again, come home at night. That was it. Whatever happened in between, that was on you. And I am so fortunate to have grown up that way. I mean, I learned so much and I had so much fun. And I just it's a totally different world we live in now. So when they are criticizing the boomers, it's like, yeah, I'm like, okay, you can say whatever you want. I feel sorry for you because you can't live the way I did.
I empathize with you there, Lou, because I was same sort of thing as you. Sort of, I can remember the twist from the 50s, sort of kind of, and then of course Twist and Shout and Elvis, and then of course the Beatles and all of that. But I was a kid too, and then I think of John Travolta and Saturday Night Fever and all the rest, and I kind of resonate with all of that. What I do know is kids don't climb trees like we used to.
Right.
They don't know how.
Do you know, this is really interesting because I mean, I was just thinking of something, and this is like sounds a little frivolous. It's actually kind of a cute, funny thing. My son is he's 17, but like we have a box of Band-Aids in the medicine cabinet that I've had probably since before he was born. Now, when I was a kid, you used to go through a box of Band-Aids every couple of weeks because you were constantly coming home scraped and cut and bruised, and nobody was like, "What happened? Yeah, he fell. He's on his bike. He was climbing a tree." But no one ever asked you. It was just like, you should clean that, baby.
And if you bumped your head, you weren't being monitored the whole time in case you had to be rushed off to hospital. You bumped your head. And if you broke your arm, you broke your arm.
Your parents would blanch if they knew how many times you probably almost got killed on your bike or something like that. It's incredible.
I challenge you to create a comedy on that. I used to climb trees, and what's happened to the kids now? And talk about your Band-Aids.
That's a great idea. You're right. That really is a good idea. Because they wouldn't even, like millennials watching that wouldn't even believe it. They would think they were looking at something from another planet.
It makes me think of the Ellen DeGeneres show where she had boomers and millennials. Did you ever see that?
No.
And she'd show the millennials something from a baby boomer day, like a telephone. And these kids didn't know what it was. And they had to be able to tell people what it was. Yeah. So that was, I reckon your stand-up comedy is going to be really cool. talk about when we first met each other on cruise liners and why you were there.
Wow. Why I was there was really, really kind of random and weird. But I had a friend that called me. He worked for a gaming company that was trying to, or actually had already been doing, getting their games, electronic games on ships. So that like bingo and things like that, that it's more modern and they can play. Like it's pretty popular. But here's the thing. So he calls me and he says, we have this new trivia game that we're trying to get on this cruise line. And I'm looking for somebody. I was going to ask you if you knew somebody who you think could go to Europe for about 10 weeks and host this pilot program. It's not really like, I had done stand up on a cruise ship a couple of times. It wasn't really my bag. I had nothing against it. It's fine. But that's not what this was, though. This was like being a host of a game show. And I just thought it was so bizarre. But the idea of basically getting paid to go and take this cruise was rattling around in my head. So I just, out of nowhere, I just said, hey, I'll do it. And he's like, would you really? I said, yeah, why? He goes, because I think it'd be great if you did it. I want somebody who's been around the block and, is mature and is going to, we're not going to have to worry about it. I'd rather have somebody I know. And I said, okay. And there we go. So I went to do it. It was weird. There's a lot of weirdness to this story. But the bottom line was that what wasn't really anticipated was the fact, first of all, that cruise line that we were on, Oceania, was more of an older crowd. So not that they're not into trivia, they are. But what they like about playing trivia is they like being in those rooms, those wood paneled rooms with the couches where they can talk to each other, right? Once again, they come from a generation where they don't want to have an electronic device in their hand while they're on vacation. They want to meet people they never met before. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but so long story short, when we started to present this notion to them, they weren't really that into it. So there was this very, very sparse attendance and lack of enthusiasm, coupled with the fact that the technology failed almost every time we did it. It was very weird. And it was a good thing that I was doing it, because at least I could hang. I'd done warm-up on shows before, so I knew how to vamp and kill time while they were literally tearing something out of the wall to fix it. It was ridiculous. But, from crisis leads to opportunity. I found myself having less and less to do with that in terms of my time and my demand on my time. And I was able to sort of transition into being a, what do you call it? I guess like a chaperone. What do they call those people? The people that work on the ship, they're part of the crew. They go out on the tours with the passengers. And we're in all these wonderful ports in Northern Europe and Russia. So now all of a sudden I'm getting to go to all of these great like river trips on the Neva and Germany. It was fantastic. So that became almost like my job. So they don't have to pay me or anything. And it's kind of helpful to them. And I'm getting paid by the company I'm working for. So it just turned into this bizarre and strangely wonderful sort of Groundhog Day thing. Because on the Baltic cruise, I did it 4 times, right? Back and forth. So that meant that every port that was on that itinerary, I went to 4 times. So it was like being Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. So I'm in Amsterdam. Okay, last time I was here, I didn't rent a bike. I think I'll do that. So whatever. So every place I went to, I was able to explore different aspects of it. It was really great. So that's what happened. That's why I was there, and that's what it turned into. And then the other part is that after the Baltic cruise was over, the cruise was then going to do a Mediterranean cruise. So there were 3 stops in France, 3 stops in Spain, and 3 stops in Italy, which was where it ended for me. And having, of course, come from Italy, my family coming from Italy, I was going to take that opportunity to go and drive down to the town where my grandparents came from, which I totally miscalculated how far that was from Rome, but I did it, and it was incredible. So that whole experience was kind of a weird, once in a lifetime opportunity. That I was a little stressed out about it, but I eventually realized, well, enjoy this. This is obviously a gift somehow that you're being given, and so again, I was in this warp where time didn't matter anymore. I was in this cruise time warp thing where it was just up to me to enjoy it and have fun with it.
Absolutely. And, of course, I also was going and assisting the tour and travel section. I mean, I was a manager for the art gallery and an auctioneer. Yeah. However, they used to ask us to go along and herd the passengers like they were like herding cats. Yeah. They were really naughty. They would sort of disappear and you'd have to go and catch them and get them back into the group. Otherwise, of course, the ship leaves without them because they've got to stick to the itinerary. Talk to us. Let's talk about where you and I always remember this, and every time I send you a message is, hey, remember that ballet we went to watch in St. Petersburg? Talk about that. That was cool.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was really cool to be in Russia, right? I mean, and I think so remember, this is 2009. This is when, relations between at least the U.S. and Russia were probably about as good as they had ever been post-Soviet time and pre-now time for a very small window. So, but even then I found Russians were totally not really into Americans. They were so bred against 70 years of communism. They just hated us or whatever. They didn't trust us. But, that aside, I found it really fascinating. By the way, one of the things that was so cool about being on the cruise too is that there were all these great speakers and lecturers that would come. So you're on your way to Russia. So a couple of days before that, you can go watch this guy that wrote a book about Peter the Great. And I started to really get into Russian history because it's really fascinating, very interesting. So I was really looking forward to doing that. And that was one of the things that was one of those trips that we got a chance to go. And I guess you and I, were tasked to do the same event, and it was the ballet in St. Petersburg. But it wasn't like the Bolshoi or some whatever the crazy great Russian ballet is. I don't even know what it was called. I'm sure it had a name, but it was very basic, not like the best of the best, not representative of excellent Russian dance. And the thing that we were laughing about the most, I remember, was that the lead dancer, the guy was he had like the grace of a donkey up there. He was just this big clunky guy, and he looked like a dancer kind of, but he just was I don't know. It was even someone like me who doesn't have any real knowledge of the dance could tell this guy's not really. He's no Nureyev.
No, he was not, definitely. It was a Black Swan we went and watched. And I think in that period of time as well, we were lucky enough they'd opened up Catherine the Great's Summer Palace. Yes. We were able to go in and have a look at that. And they didn't normally open it up to the public. Yeah. So that was really something exciting. And that is part of, like you're saying, being in the cruise world, it is being, when you crew, it's being in another world. And you're on this floating island, and just hope and pray that all the staff that I know and crew who have lost jobs during COVID-19, thousands and thousands of them.
It's funny. I was thinking about that the other day. Because I know, like on social media, I have a lot of comedian friends that I grew up with in the business. A lot of them went into that. They haven't worked since March. And then I, of course, forget that all the other people that I met, a lot of people that were crew members, and that's their life. lives, they haven't worked either. So yeah, that's a huge business to have taken a hit like that. It's really, really sad. It's
really sad. And I think of, tourism and travel as we knew at that time, airlines, everything. So that's, again, when we look at people and trying to rediscover their lives and listening to you now at how you have recreated yourself has been really fantastic, Lou. And I thank you for really taking the time to speak to everybody about how you got back and you decided that you were going to reinvent yourself and get going again and do the creative things you love. So, Lou, thank you so much for spending this time and telling us your stories. And I could have you back 10 times because you're just such a bright star. And I really appreciate you so much. So it's been a real pleasure having you here on Awaken Your Mind Magic.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's been my pleasure. And we should do it again sometime. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to, but something else will happen in the interim too. I hope.
Oh, we're just going to I'm going to grab you and get you to be my co-presenter or something in the next season. How about that?
All right.
Will that be a date? And we'll talk about climbing trees.
Yeah. There you go.
Lou, how can people get hold of you to be able to find out more about you, or how can they follow you?
I'm on Twitter at Lou DiMaggio, LOUDIMAGGIO. I'm assuming you're going to put that up there some.
Yeah, I'm going to put them all up there.
Twitter, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, also Lou DiMaggio. I'm on Facebook. What else is there? LinkedIn.
Amazon.
Apple. My movie's on Amazon. Don't forget, Where Have You Gone, Lou DiMaggio. If you like comedy and comedians, you'll love this movie. I'm hawking it now. Oh my God, it sounds so.
Yeah, you go for it. That's what this is all about.
But I look forward to meeting new people all the time. So I look forward to meeting you folks out there in the universe.
Thank you, Lou. Love you lots, and thank you for being here with us today. Bye now.
Bye now. Peace and love.
That's Awaken Your Mind Magic for another week. If anything you've heard today has really impacted you and you want to know more, or you would just like to connect with me, then visit my website, awakenyourmindmagic.com, and reach out for a free one-on-one discovery session with me. Silver on the outside. Silver on the outside. Gold on the inside. Silver on the outside. Gold on the inside. Tune in next week, where I'll be discussing more tools to unlock your dreams and live a limitless life that you would truly love to live. I'm Susan Kathleen, and this has been Awaken Your Mind Magic.